The first thing Adrian Blackwood gave me was not a ring, not a promise, and not even a glance of kindness, but a sentence so cold it felt like winter had entered my bones. "This marriage is business." He said it in front of 2 families, 12 witnesses, 3 attorneys, and a priest who looked as if he wished he could vanish into the marble floor. I stood beneath the white arches of St. Bartholomew's Cathedral in downtown Chicago, dressed in a tailored ivory suit I had not chosen, wearing a silver tie my mother said made me look pure, and I understood with perfect clarity that I was not walking toward a husband. I was walking toward a contract with a heartbeat. My name was Caleb Whitmore, 23 years old, the last Omega son of a family that had once owned half the city's private docks and now could barely pay the men guarding its front gate. The Whitmore name still sounded expensive when spoken in the right room, but behind our polished doors, everything was falling apart. Debts. Broken alliances. Empty accounts. Quiet threats delivered through lawyers instead of bullets, because men like Adrian Blackwood no longer needed to raise their voices to ruin you. He controlled banks, shipping routes, nightclubs, construction companies, and every whispered deal that moved beneath the city's clean glass skyline. People called him the Blackwood Enigma, though never to his face. Some said he was born without fear. Others said he was born without mercy. I only knew that when he turned his pale gray eyes toward me, the entire cathedral seemed to hold its breath. He was tall, over 6 feet, dressed in a black suit sharp enough to look ceremonial, his white hair combed back with effortless precision, his face beautiful in the way a locked door could be beautiful. Untouchable. Unforgiving. My father stood beside me with one hand pressed too firmly against my shoulder, smiling for the guests while his fingers trembled. To anyone watching, it looked like pride. To me, it felt like a warning. Do not embarrass us. Do not run. Do not forget what this marriage is buying. Safety. Time. Survival. Across from us, Adrian did not smile. He accepted the ring from his attorney. Instead of a best man, as if even friendship was too personal for this ceremony. When the priest asked if he would take me as his lawfully wedded husband, Adrian answered, "I will," with the same calm tone a man might use to approve a merger. The words should have relieved me. Instead, they made my chest tighten. I wanted to hate him then. It would have been easier. But hate requires closeness, and Adrian Blackwood felt like something carved from distance. When it was my turn, my voice nearly failed. I looked at the stained glass windows, at the winter sunlight breaking into pieces of blue and gold across the aisle, and wondered how something so beautiful could witness something so hollow. I said, "I will," because my family had already traded my future for theirs, and because everyone I loved was watching to make sure I paid the price quietly. The ring slid onto my finger, cold and heavy, a perfect circle that felt less like devotion than a polished restraint. No one cheered. The guests applauded softly, politely, like investors approving a difficult but necessary decision. Adrian leaned close, and for one dangerous second, his scent reached me beneath the cathedral's incense, dark cedar, rain on stone, and something ancient that made every instinct in me go still. His voice was low enough that only I could hear it. "You will be treated with respect in my house, Mr. Whitmore, but do not mistake this arrangement for romance." The words landed cleanly. No cruelty. No warmth. Just truth. I lifted my chin, refusing to let him see that my hands were cold. "Of course, Mr. Blackwood," I whispered. I would never confuse a purchase for a love story. For the first time that day, something changed in his expression. Not anger. Not surprise exactly. A flicker, small as a match struck in a dark room. Then it vanished, and he offered me his arm for the walk back down the aisle. Cameras flashed. My family smiled. His men watched the exits. Outside, Chicago waited under a pale February sky, the streets lined with black cars and silent security. The wind cut through my suit as Adrian guided me toward the lead vehicle, his hand resting lightly at my back without ever truly touching me. It should have felt courteous. Instead, it felt like being escorted from one life into another. As the cathedral doors closed behind us, I looked back once, hoping for some sign that the boy I had been was still standing there, free and untouched by all of this. But there was only marble, candlelight, and the echo of vows neither of us had meant. Then Adrian opened the car door and said, "Come, Caleb. We have appearances to finish." And I realized the wedding had not been the beginning of my marriage. It had been the end of my escape. The ride from the cathedral to Bellini Tower lasted only 20 minutes, but it felt long enough for my old life to become a rumor. I sat in the back of the black town car beside Adrian Blackwood, close enough to hear the quiet rhythm of his breathing, far enough to understand that the space between us was not measured in inches. It was measured in power. Chicago moved past the tinted windows in streaks of winter gray and electric gold, office towers rising like cold monuments against the evening sky. My phone buzzed twice in my pocket. Once from my mother, telling me I had done well. Once from my father, telling me not to make things difficult. I turned the phone off without answering. Adrian noticed, of course. I was beginning to think he noticed everything. He did not ask who had messaged me. He did not ask if I was all right. He only looked ahead and said, "My staff has been instructed to give you anything you need. Your rooms are on the east side of the penthouse. Mine are on the west. The arrangement should be comfortable." Comfortable. The word almost made me laugh. I had just been married like a debt settlement, driven through the city under guard, and delivered to the home of a man people feared too much to describe honestly, yet comfort was apparently the goal. I folded my hands in my lap, hiding the way my wedding ring pressed into my skin. "And what exactly am I expected to do there?" I asked. Adrian turned his head slightly. His gray eyes caught the passing lights, turning silver for a moment. "Live," he said. Quietly, preferably. It was not an insult. That made it worse. It was a policy. Bellini Tower rose 80 stories above the river, all black glass and private security, with a lobby so silent it felt less like a home than the entrance to a museum no one was allowed to enjoy. We did not enter through the front. The car descended into a private underground garage where men in dark coats waited beside a private elevator. No one stared at me openly, but I felt their attention pass over my face, my suit, my ring, and settle on the truth I could not hide. Omega. Husband. Leverage. Adrian stepped into the elevator first, then glanced back when I hesitated. For 1 second, I considered refusing. It was a ridiculous thought. There were cameras in every corner, guards behind me, and 70 floors of steel and glass above my head. Still, that tiny pause belonged to me. Adrian seemed to understand that, because he did not command me. He simply held the elevator door open until I walked in by choice. The penthouse was colder than the cathedral. Not in temperature, but in spirit. White marble floors reflected black leather furniture, floor-to-ceiling windows displayed the entire city, and every object looked expensive enough to be admired but never touched. It was beautiful the way a snowstorm was beautiful from behind locked doors. Adrian removed his gloves and handed them to a waiting attendant. "Mrs. Vale will show you to your rooms," he said. "Dinner is at 8. We have rules to discuss." I looked at him then, truly looked at him, and saw no trace of the man who had stood beside me at the altar. Here, he was not a groom. He was a king returning to his fortress. At 8 o'clock, I found him in a dining room longer than my childhood apartment, sitting at the head of a table set for two but wide enough to keep us strangers. The meal was elegant and tasteless in my mouth. After the staff withdrew, Adrian placed a slim folder beside my plate. House expectations, public appearances, security protocols, medical access, family contact. Each phrase was neat, civilized, and quietly suffocating. "There are 3 personal rules," he said. "You do not enter my northern office. You do not leave the building without security. And you do not involve yourself in Blackwood business." I Stared at the folder, then at him. And what do I get to decide? Something moved behind his eyes, brief and unreadable. Your comfort. Your schedule. Your clothing. Your charities, if you want them. How generous, I said softly. A cage with options. His jaw tightened, not enough for most people to see, but I saw it. Before he could answer, the lights flickered once as thunder rolled over the city. Rain struck the windows in silver lines. The sound filled the room, steady and strange, and with it came a warmth under my skin I did not understand. I pressed a hand to my chest. The air seemed suddenly too heavy, too scented with cedar and rain on stone. Adrian went very still. Caleb, he said, and for the first time since the wedding, my name sounded less like a legal fact and more like a warning. I stood too quickly. The chair scraped against the marble. I am fine. I only need air. But the room tilted, not enough to make me fall, only enough to make the world feel unreal. Adrian was at my side before I saw him move, one hand hovering near my arm without touching. His control, that perfect terrifying control, had cracked at the edges. Mrs. Vale appeared in the doorway, alarmed, but Adrian lifted one hand and she stopped. Call Dr. Serrano, he said, his voice low. Now. I wanted to argue. I wanted to tell him not to look at me as if I had become another emergency to manage. But the storm outside pressed against the glass, his scent filled my lungs, and something ancient and wordless seemed to wake between us. I remember the ring on my finger turning warm. I remember Adrian saying my name again, softer this time. Then the city lights blurred into gold, and the last thing I saw before darkness took me was the coldest man in Chicago looking genuinely afraid. I woke to the sound of rain tapping against glass and a voice I did not recognize saying my pulse was steady. For a few seconds, I could not remember where I was. The ceiling above me was too high, the sheets beneath my fingers too smooth, the air too clean and expensive. Then the weight on my left hand reminded me. The ring. The wedding. Adrian Blackwood. Bellini Tower. I turned my head and found him standing near the windows with his back to me, a black silhouette against the storm-washed city. He had changed out of his wedding suit into a dark shirt with the sleeves rolled to his forearms, but somehow he looked even less human like that, as if the removal of formality had only revealed something colder underneath. Beside my bed stood a woman in her 50s with a leather medical bag open on the nightstand. She had silver-streaked hair, sharp brown eyes, and the calm expression of someone who had survived powerful men by refusing to be impressed by them. Dr. Serrano, I guessed, before she introduced herself. She smiled gently, but not happily. Mr. Whitmore, I am Dr. Elena Serrano. You fainted during dinner. Your vitals are stable now, but I ran a few tests to be safe. The way she said safe made my throat go dry. Adrian turned from the window. He did not speak, but the room shifted with his attention. I pushed myself upright, and immediately regretted it when dizziness rippled through me. Dr. Serrano placed a firm hand near my shoulder, not touching until I nodded. Easy. You have had a difficult day. A difficult day. I almost laughed. I had been married, relocated, regulated, and examined before midnight. Difficult seemed too small a word. I looked at Adrian instead. Did you call a doctor because I fainted, or because you thought I was inconveniently fragile? His face did not change, but Dr. Serrano made a small sound, something between a cough and a hidden laugh. Adrian stepped closer to the bed. Because you collapsed in my dining room, he said. I do not leave medical events to chance. Medical events. Even concern sounded like paperwork when it came from him. Dr. Serrano lifted a tablet from the nightstand. I expected her to say dehydration, stress, low blood sugar, anything ordinary enough to let the room breathe again. Instead, she looked at the screen, and all the color slowly left her face. Adrian noticed before I did. Elena, he said. One word. Quiet. Dangerous in its control. She did not answer right away. She checked the tablet again, then the small testing device beside her bag, then me. Her professional calm did not break, but it tightened like glass under pressure. Caleb, she said carefully, have you ever been told that your omega markers are unusual? My fingers curled into the sheets. My family had doctors for appearances, not honesty. I was told I was healthy. That is not what I asked. No, I whispered. She drew a slow breath. Then I need both of you to listen carefully. The bond response your body experienced tonight was not a simple stress reaction. It triggered a rare biological cascade usually documented only in Enigma Omega pairings with exceptional compatibility. I stared at her, waiting for the sentence to become clear. It did not. Adrian, however, went absolutely still. Dr. Serrano looked at him, and for the first time, I saw someone in his world hesitate before telling him the truth. The early indicators are positive, she said. Caleb is pregnant. The storm outside seemed to stop. Not really, of course. Rain still blurred the glass, thunder still rolled somewhere beyond the skyline, but inside that room, sound disappeared. My hand moved to my stomach before thought could stop it. There was nothing to feel, no proof beneath my palm, only warmth and the sudden terrifying idea that my life had split open again in less than 24 hours. That is impossible, I said, though my voice sounded far away. Dr. Serrano looked at me with a kindness that hurt. Under ordinary circumstances, yes. With an Enigma bond this strong, no. Rare does not mean impossible. I turned to Adrian, expecting anger, denial, maybe accusation. Anything would have been easier than what I saw. Fear, locked behind discipline so severe it looked like stone. He was not looking at my stomach. He was looking at my face, as if waiting for me to vanish. Say something, I demanded, because silence was becoming unbearable. His gaze shifted once to Dr. Serrano. Leave us. She packed slowly, unwilling but obedient, and paused at the door. Caleb needs rest, hydration, and calm. Not strategy, Adrian. Calm. Then she was gone, and I was alone with the man who had called our marriage business while my future quietly rewrote itself inside me. Adrian stood beside the bed but did not sit. He did not reach for me. He did not apologize. When he finally spoke, his voice was lower than I had ever heard it. From this moment on, no one outside this room and Dr. Serrano knows. I felt something inside me harden. That is your first thought. Secrecy. His jaw tightened. My first thought is survival. Yours. The child's. I looked down at the ring on my hand, cold again beneath the lamplight. Yesterday, I had belonged to my family's debts. Today, I belonged to Adrian Blackwood's precautions. And somewhere between those two cages, a tiny impossible heartbeat had become the most dangerous secret in Chicago. By morning, Adrian Blackwood had turned protection into architecture. The east wing of the penthouse was no longer just a set of rooms I was allowed to use. It became a private world with new locks, new cameras, new guards, and a new silence that pressed against my skin harder than any command. Mrs. Vale arrived at 7 with breakfast, a schedule, and the careful expression of a woman who knew more than she was permitted to say. Fresh fruit, oatmeal with brown sugar, peppermint tea, prenatal vitamins lined up in a silver dish as if they were pearls. Dr. Serrano's orders, she explained. Mr. Blackwood also asked that you avoid unnecessary stress. I looked past her to the hallway, where 2 security men stood at a polite distance in black suits, facing away as if that made them invisible. Did Mr. Blackwood also ask that I avoid doors? Mrs. Vale's mouth tightened with sympathy she did not voice. The building is secure. That was not an answer. It was the kind of sentence people used when the truth would sound too cruel spoken plainly. I thanked her because she had not caused any of this, then sat alone at a small marble table by the window, staring out at Chicago 80 floors below. The city looked free from up there, all moving cars, Silver River, morning commuters wrapped in scarves, people walking fast because their lives still belonged to them. Mine had been reduced to meals, measurements, medical appointments, and the guarded distance between my room and the elevator. Adrian did not come to breakfast. He sent instructions. Dr. Serrano came at 10. She checked my pulse, my temperature, my blood pressure, and spoke to me like a person, which almost made me cry. She said the early signs were stable. She said my body was adjusting. She said I had choices, and when I gave her a bitter look, she added, I mean medically, Caleb. I cannot promise the rest. That honesty hurt less than comfort would have. After she left, I walked the length of the East Wing counting steps because numbers gave my anger somewhere to go. 42 steps from my bedroom to the sitting room. 16 from the sitting room to the locked terrace door. 29 from the terrace to the hallway where a guard lowered his eyes and said, I am sorry, Mr. Whitmore, but Mr. Blackwood requested that you remain on this floor. Requested. That word again. Every order in Adrian's world dressed itself like courtesy. By noon, my mother called. I almost did not answer, but some foolish part of me still wanted to hear concern in her voice. Instead, she sounded relieved. Your father says Adrian has already begun settling matters with the creditors. The house staff will stay. Your sister's tuition is covered. You did well, Caleb. I stood very still, the phone warm against my ear. I fainted last night, I said. There was a small pause, then a soft sigh. Weddings are overwhelming. Try not to be dramatic. Something inside me folded shut. She did not ask if I was all right. She did not know about the pregnancy, and still she had already chosen gratitude over worry. I ended the call and placed the phone face down on the table as if it had burned me. At 2, a team arrived with clothing racks I had not requested. Soft sweaters, tailored coats, silk pajamas, shoes in my exact size. Everything cream, gray, blue, expensive, tasteful, and selected by someone who understood my body better than my will. I touched the sleeve of a cashmere cardigan and wondered whether this was what ownership felt like when it had money. No chains. Just comfort arranged so perfectly that complaint made you sound ungrateful. Adrian finally appeared after sunset. I heard the change before I saw him, the subtle shift in the guards, the respectful quiet that moved ahead of him like weather. He entered without knocking, then stopped when he found me standing by the window wearing my own wrinkled wedding shirt from the day before. None of the new clothes had been touched. His eyes moved from the untouched racks to my face. You need proper clothing, he said. I have clothing. Not enough for your condition. My condition. The word struck harder than I expected. I turned fully toward him. Do you mean my pregnancy, Adrian, or my imprisonment? His expression remained controlled, but the air around him sharpened. You are not imprisoned. Then let me leave. Not tonight. Tomorrow. No answer. I laughed once, softly, without humor. There it is. The truth finally forgot to wear gloves. He stepped closer, stopping several feet away, as if distance was the only kindness he trusted himself to offer. There are people who would use you if they knew. There are people who would use the child. I am keeping you alive. No, I said, my voice trembling but clear. You are keeping me contained. There is a difference. For a moment, he looked almost wounded, but it passed so quickly I could have imagined it. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter. I do not know how to protect something gently. The confession should have softened me. Instead, it made the room feel colder, because I realized he believed it was enough to know his own flaw without changing it. I placed my hand over my stomach, not because there was anything to show, but because I needed to remind myself that the secret inside me was not only his. Then learn, I said. Because I am not one of your businesses, Adrian. I am not your alliance, your heir, or your asset. I am your husband, whether either of us wanted that or not. Outside, the city lights flickered against the glass like distant stars. Adrian looked at me for a long time, and for once, the silence between us did not feel empty. It felt like a locked door waiting for one of us to find the courage to open it. The change began with a sound so small I almost missed it, one sharp knock at my door, followed by Mrs. Vale entering without her usual tray. Her face was composed, but her hands were clasped too tightly in front of her black dress. "Mr. Blackwood has asked that you remain away from the windows this evening," she said. I looked up from the book I had not been reading for the past hour. "Why?" A pause. "Weather concerns." It was a clear night. The sky beyond the glass was dark blue, clean, and bright with city light. I closed the book slowly. "Mrs. Vale, I know what a lie sounds like when it is trying to be polite." Her eyes softened, and for one fragile moment, I thought she might tell me the truth. Then the penthouse intercom chimed, low and urgent, and she turned away as if rescued by duty. "Please stay in the sitting room, Mr. Whitmore." That was how I learned danger had found me, not through sirens, not through shouting, but through the careful manners of people trained to hide fear behind service. The guards in the hallway had doubled. Adrian's men moved with quiet purpose, speaking into earpieces, closing doors, drawing curtains across glass walls that had always been left open to the skyline. The golden cage tightened around me, and suddenly I understood that the bars had never only been for keeping me in. They were also for keeping something else out. Adrian arrived 20 minutes later, carrying the cold night with him. His coat was damp at the shoulders, his silver hair slightly disordered, and there was a narrow red mark along his jaw that made my heart stop before I could tell myself not to care. He saw me notice it and turned his face away. "You should be resting," he said. "You should be explaining," I answered. His gaze cut to Mrs. Vale, then to the guards. "Everyone out." The room emptied at once. When the door closed, the silence felt enormous. Adrian stood near the fireplace, though no fire had been lit. He looked less like a man coming home and more like a wall that had learned how to breathe. I waited. He removed his gloves finger by finger, an act so controlled it made my anger sharpen. "Victor Cain sent a message," he said at last. The name meant nothing to me, but the way he spoke it made the room colder. "Who is Victor Cain?" "Someone who believes my marriage created an opportunity." "For what?" His eyes met mine. "Leverage." I felt my stomach tighten. "He knows." "Not enough." "A rumor." "A suspicion." A careless whisper from someone who should have known better. I heard the restraint in his voice and realized it was not calm. It was fury locked behind manners. "What kind of message?" Adrian looked toward the covered windows. The question hung between us long enough for me to imagine a dozen terrible answers. Then he said, "A christening blanket. White silk. Delivered to one of my restaurants with your initials embroidered in blue. No damage. No threat written down. Just enough to say he is listening." The room seemed to tilt again, but this time I stayed on my feet. A baby blanket. That was all. No violence, no spectacle, nothing loud enough to justify panic to anyone outside this life. But the meaning reached me with icy precision. Someone had imagined the child before I had even learned how to breathe around the idea. Someone had reached into the most private part of my future and left a calling card. Adrian took one step toward me, then stopped when I flinched. The flinch hurt us both. I saw it pass through his face before he buried it. "Caleb, I will not let him near you. You keep saying that like it fixes the fact that people know I exist only because of you." His jaw tightened. "People knew you existed because your family offered you to me in a room full of men who trade secrets for sport." The words landed hard, not because they were cruel, but because they were true. My family had smiled through my sale. His world had simply collected the receipt. I sank into the nearest chair, one hand pressed over my stomach. It was still too early for anything to feel different, and yet everything felt different. The child was not a shape or a sound yet. It was a possibility. A terrifying, innocent possibility already surrounded by names like Blackwood, Whitmore, and Cain. Adrian's voice changed when he spoke again, lower, almost careful. Dr. Serrano is coming in the morning. Additional security starts tonight. You will move to the inner suite until I know which channel leaked the information. I looked up slowly. The inner suite? No windows, reinforced access, private medical station. Safe. There was that word again, dressed like a gift and carrying a lock. Behind its back. I stood, anger burning through the fear. You do not get to shrink my world every time yours becomes dangerous. My world has always been dangerous. Then why did you drag me into it? For the first time, Adrian had no answer ready. The perfect enigma, the man who could turn silence into a weapon, looked at me as if my question had found a place no armor covered. I thought I was acquiring peace, he said after a long moment. An alliance. Stability. And now? His eyes dropped, not to my stomach this time, but to my hand resting protectively there. Now I have given my enemies a reason to look at you. The honesty stole some of my anger and left something more complicated behind. He was still controlling. Still impossible. Still the architect of my cage. But beneath all that, I saw the first visible crack in the monster everyone feared. It looked like guilt. I stepped closer, slowly enough that he could not mistake it for surrender. If you want to protect me, start by telling me the truth before the walls move. Adrian looked at me for a long time. Then, quietly, he said, Victor Cain is not my only problem. I asked the question even though I already feared the answer. Who else? His expression hardened again, but not before I saw the shadow beneath it. Someone inside your family knew enough to speak. The words followed me into the inner suite long after Adrian left. Someone inside your family knew enough to speak. I lay awake beneath a ceiling painted the color of pearl, surrounded by every luxury a person could mistake for kindness, and felt the shape of that truth pressing against my ribs. The inner suite had no windows. Adrian had called it secure. Mrs. Vale had called it temporary. I called it what it was, a beautiful room designed by someone who believed fear could be managed with expensive furniture and locked doors. The bed was wide enough for 4 people, the blankets soft as water, the walls lined with books I might have loved under different circumstances. There was a private bathroom, a medical cabinet, a small sitting area, and a screen showing a live feed of the hallway outside. 2 guards stood there at all times, facing away from my door like statues pretending not to be bars. Dr. Serrano arrived just after sunrise, wearing a camel coat over her navy dress and carrying a paper bag from a bakery on Michigan Avenue. I brought muffins, she said. Real ones, not the protein bricks Adrian thinks human beings enjoy. It was the first time I laughed since the wedding, and the sound startled me. She checked my blood pressure, asked about nausea, dizziness, appetite, sleep. I answered honestly until she asked about stress, and then we both looked around the sealed room and let the silence answer for me. The early signs are still stable, she said, her voice gentle. Your body is adjusting better than I expected. That should have comforted me, but I touched my stomach and felt only awe tangled with fear. It does not feel real yet, I admitted. She sat beside me, not too close. It does not have to. Sometimes the heart takes longer to arrive than the body. Before she left, she pulled a small handheld monitor from her bag. It is too early for what most people expect, but with your bond response, there may be something we can observe. Only if you want to try. The words "only if you want" felt so unfamiliar that my throat tightened. I nodded. She placed the device gently near my lower abdomen, adjusted the setting, and watched the screen. At first there was nothing but faint static and a soft pulsing line. Then the door opened. Adrian stepped inside, already speaking to someone behind him, but he stopped the moment he saw the monitor. The line on the screen jumped. Dr. Serrano froze. I looked down. The pulse steadied, tiny and bright, responding not to the machine, not to me, but to the man standing across the room. Adrian did not move. His face went blank in that terrifying way of his, but his hand tightened around the folder he carried until the paper bent. Dr. Serrano looked from the monitor to him, then to me. Interesting, she murmured. I hated that word. Interesting was what people said when my life became evidence. What does it mean? I asked. She turned the device slightly so I could see the small flicker more clearly. It means the bond is active. The baby is responding to Adrian's presence, or more likely, to his voice and Enigma signature. It is not harmful. In fact, it appears calming. Adrian looked as if someone had placed a fragile universe in his hands and ordered him not to break it. He took one careful step closer. The line brightened again, steady as a whisper. I should have been angry. Part of me was. Even before the child had a name, the bond recognized him. Even before I understood what I wanted, my body found safety in the man who had locked me away. It felt unfair. It felt intimate in a way no one had asked permission to be. Dr. Serrano removed the monitor and packed it with deliberate calm. Caleb needs less confinement, she said to Adrian without looking afraid of him. Stress is not good for him, and neither is loneliness. Protection is not the same as isolation. Adrian's gaze stayed on me. I know. Those two words changed the room more than an apology would have. After she left, he remained near the door, as if unsure whether he was allowed to come closer. I sat on the edge of the bed, one hand still resting over the place where the tiny flicker had been. Did you hear that? I asked. There was no sound, he said. You know what I mean. His eyes lowered. Yes. For the first time, he did not sound like a boss, a husband by contract, or an enigma feared by half the city. He sounded like a man standing before something he could not command. Later that night, I woke thirsty and found the suite door slightly open. Beyond it, in the dim hallway, Adrian stood alone beside a half-assembled crib I had not known anyone ordered. His jacket was gone, his sleeves rolled up, a small instruction booklet open in one hand. He looked absurdly serious, as if negotiating with wooden rails and tiny silver screws required the full discipline of the Blackwood Empire. I should have stepped away. Instead, I listened. He touched the edge of the crib, very gently, and whispered, I do not know how to be safe for either of you yet, but I will learn. Something inside my chest hurt then, not sharply, but deeply. Because the monster had not vanished. The cage had not opened. My family had still betrayed me, and Victor Cain was still somewhere beyond the walls. But in that quiet hallway, under soft yellow light, Adrian Blackwood made a promise to someone too small to hear him, and for the first time, I wanted to believe he might keep it. The truth arrived wearing my mother's perfume. It came in the middle of the afternoon, tucked inside a delivery box from the Whitmore estate, wrapped in cream tissue paper and tied with the same blue ribbon my family used for holiday gifts when we still pretended we could afford holidays. Mrs. Vale brought it to me with careful hands and a careful face. Your mother sent personal items from your old room, she said. Mr. Blackwood had security inspect the package. It is cleared. Cleared. As if memories could be scanned for danger. I sat on the sofa in the inner suite and opened the box slowly, expecting sweaters, books, maybe the worn sketch journal I had hidden beneath my mattress when I was 17. At first, that was what I found. A gray scarf. 2 paperbacks. A framed photograph of my sister and me at Lake Geneva, back when our family still rented a summer house and my father still smiled with his whole face. Then I found the envelope. It was sealed beneath the false bottom of the box, thin and white, with my name written in my mother's elegant handwriting. My first thought was that she had finally written something tender because she could not say it aloud. My second thought came too late. The moment I opened it, I knew tenderness had never been the point. Inside was a copy of an agreement, folded twice, marked with signatures I recognized before my mind accepted them. My father's. My mother's. Victor Cain's. The language was clean, legal, and merciless. In exchange for continued financial protection of the Whitmore estate, any biological heir produced through the Blackwood marriage would be acknowledged as a negotiable blood asset in the event of Adrian Blackwood's political failure or removal from leadership. I read the sentence 3 times. Not because I did not understand it, but because some part of me kept trying to make it become something else. Blood asset. Not child. Not baby. Not my future. Asset. My hand went numb, and the papers slipped onto the floor like white birds with broken wings. Mrs. Vale moved toward me, but I stood too quickly and nearly stumbled. I am fine, I said, though my voice sounded nothing like me. Please call Adrian. She did not move. Mr. Blackwood is in a closed meeting. Then open it. Mrs. Vale saw my face and left without another word. While I waited, I picked up the agreement again, and a smaller note fell from between the pages. This one was from my mother. Caleb, forgive us. We had no choice. Cain promised the clause would never matter if Adrian remained strong. Do not make trouble. Think of the family. Think of the family. I had spent my entire life thinking of the family. I thought of them when I stood at the altar. I thought of them when I swallowed humiliation at dinner. I thought of them when my mother called my fear dramatic and my father counted Adrian's payments like blessings. But as I looked at the note, a new and terrible understanding settled inside me. They had not sold me once. They had sold me twice. First as a husband to save their name, then as a vessel for a future they planned to bargain with if power shifted. Adrian arrived with 2 men behind him, but he stopped at the doorway when he saw the papers in my hand. His face changed before he read them. Maybe he recognized the kind of betrayal that leaves no blood on the floor but still empties a room of air. Caleb, he said carefully. Did you know? I asked. The question was quiet, and that made it worse. His eyes sharpened. Know what? I handed him the agreement. He read it standing still, but the silence around him darkened with every line. By the time he reached the signatures, the controlled man I knew had become something colder and much more frightening. No, he said. One word, absolute. I did not know. I wanted to believe him, and that desire made me angry enough to breathe again. Because if he was innocent of this, then there was no single villain large enough to carry the weight of what had happened to me. There was only a room full of people who had each taken one piece of my life and called it necessity. Adrian looked at me. This agreement is meaningless. Not to me. It is unenforceable. Not to me. His expression shifted, pain passing through the cracks before pride sealed them. Caleb, I will destroy this clause, their leverage, their access, all of it. I laughed once, and it came out almost gentle. You still think this is about paperwork? I walked past him to the bedroom, my movements calm in the strange way people become calm when they have broken too completely to shake. I packed only what would fit into one small leather bag, my wallet, my phone, the photograph from Lake Geneva, and the gray scarf from the box. Adrian followed me to the doorway but did not cross the threshold. Where are you going? Somewhere no one owns the next breath I take. You are not safe outside. I turned then, holding the bag against my side. I am not safe here. The words wounded him. I saw it. But I could not comfort the man who had built the cage, even if someone else had poisoned the lock. I took off my wedding ring and placed it on the dresser. His eyes dropped to it, and for 1 second the entire Blackwood empire seemed to stand helpless in that small circle of silver. "Caleb," he said, softer now. "Do not leave like this." I looked at him, at the powerful enigma who had terrified a city but did not know how to ask without sounding like a command. "You bought my name," I whispered. "They sold my body. No one asked for my heart." Then I walked out before he could teach my hope to stay. By the time I reached the old Union Station, the city had turned silver with evening rain. I had taken the service elevator down through 3 floors of parking, slipped through a side entrance while a delivery truck blocked the cameras, and walked 6 blocks before letting myself breathe. It was not a perfect escape. Nothing about me felt perfect. My shoes were wrong for the weather, my coat was too thin, and every passing black car made my heart climb into my throat. But for the first time since the wedding, each step belonged to me. The station was warm, crowded, and full of ordinary noise. Rolling suitcases clicked over tile. A child cried because his mitten was missing. College students in hoodies argued over coffee. Businessmen checked watches. No one looked at me and saw a contract. No one knew my name had become a bargaining chip between families who called greed survival. I bought a ticket to Milwaukee because it was the first train leaving in less than an hour, and because 65 miles sounded like a universe when you had been living inside locked doors. I sat near the far end of the waiting hall with my small bag on my lap and my gray scarf wrapped around my neck, trying not to touch my stomach too often. I did not know where I would go after Milwaukee. I did not know how long I could stay hidden. I only knew I could not raise a child in a world where every expression of love came with a signature line. Then the station changed. It was subtle at first, a ripple of silence moving through the crowd. Conversation softened. People turned. Not because anyone shouted, and not because anyone pushed through the doors like a villain in an old movie. Adrian Blackwood did not need spectacle. He entered with 2 guards behind him and enough presence to make a public station feel suddenly private. His black coat was wet from the rain, his silver hair darker at the edges, his face controlled but pale in a way I had never seen. He did not scan the room like a man searching for property. He searched like a man who had lost something he had no right to claim but could not survive leaving lost. When his eyes found mine, everything inside me tightened. I stood, clutching the strap of my bag. "Do not," I said before he reached me. "Do not order me back." Adrian stopped several feet away. His guards stopped farther behind him. People still watched from the corners of their eyes, sensing drama without understanding the shape of it. "I will not order you," he said. The words were quiet, but they struck harder than any command. I almost did not trust them. "You followed me." "Yes." "To drag me home?" "No." "Then why are you here?" For the first time since I had known him, Adrian looked unsure of how to stand. His hands were empty at his sides. No folder. No phone. No documents. No rules. Just the man, stripped of every weapon that made him easier to hate. "Because you were right," he said. "I bought your name. I built a safer cage and expected you to thank me for the quality of the locks." My throat tightened, but I forced my voice to stay steady. "That does not change what happened." "No. It does not." He took one slow breath. "I froze your family's accounts connected to the Cain agreement. I removed their access to you, legally and financially. Dr. Serrano is protected. Mrs. Vale knows you are to be obeyed, not managed. The inner suite is open. The guards will answer to you as much as to me." I stared at him, the words arriving too quickly to become trust. "You did all of that after I left. I should have done it before you had to." There it was, not an excuse, not a strategy, but the closest thing to remorse I had ever heard from him. Still, pain made me careful. "And if I do not come back?" His eyes flickered, but he did not look away. "Then I will make sure you have money, protection, medical care, and silence. You will never have to see me unless you choose to." The announcement board chimed overhead. My train number appeared in bright white letters. Milwaukee. Boarding soon. Freedom had a platform now. A gate. A direction. All I had to do was walk. Adrian saw me look, and something in him gave way. He stepped back, not forward, then lowered himself to one knee on the polished station floor. The sound that moved through the watching crowd was soft and stunned. I forgot how to breathe. Adrian Blackwood, the enigma men feared to name, knelt in front of me beneath fluorescent lights, with rain on his coat and no pride left between us. "Come back only if you choose me," he said. "Not the contract. Not the child. Not fear. Me." My hand trembled on the strap of my bag. "You do not know how to love me." "No," he said, voice rough with honesty. "But I know how to learn." The train doors opened somewhere beyond the hall. I stood between the life I had escaped and the man who had finally stopped calling possession protection. For the first time, Adrian did not reach for me. He waited. And somehow, that was the first thing he had ever truly given me. I did not board the train to Milwaukee. For a long time, I told myself I stayed because of practical things, because Dr. Serrano was in Chicago, because running while pregnant and unprepared was not courage, because a person could choose safety without surrendering freedom. All of that was true. None of it was the whole truth. The whole truth was that Adrian Blackwood knelt in the middle of Union Station and gave me the one thing no one else had offered since this began. A choice. I walked back to him slowly, not because I was ready to forgive everything, but because I was ready to stop letting other people decide the shape of my life. When I stopped in front of him, he did not touch me. He waited until I held out my hand. Only then did he rise, careful and silent, as if one wrong movement could break the fragile bridge between us. "I am not going back to a cage," I said. "Never again," he answered. "And if you forget? Then you leave, and I spend the rest of my life remembering why." We returned to Bellini Tower under a rain-softened sky, but nothing was the same when the elevator doors opened. The curtains were gone. The inner suite stood open and empty. The guards lowered their eyes to me not as a prisoner, but as someone whose permission mattered. Mrs. Vale met us in the foyer, and for the first time, she asked me what I wanted for dinner instead of telling me what had been prepared. It was such a small thing that it nearly undid me. Over the next weeks, Adrian kept changing, not dramatically, not in the easy way stories sometimes pretend broken men become gentle overnight, but in small choices that cost him pride. He knocked before entering. He asked before assigning security. He told me where he was going and why. He gave me access to every legal document tied to my name. He sat beside me during calls with attorneys as my parents lost their power to reach me, use me, or speak for me. I did not take revenge on them. I did something colder and cleaner. I removed myself from the family ledger. The Whitmore estate was settled, but my life was no longer part of the payment. Victor Cain's agreement collapsed quietly under lawyers, testimony, and the kind of financial pressure Adrian understood better than anyone. There was no grand confrontation, no dramatic ending for him, only closed accounts, lost allies, and doors that stopped opening. By spring, the city thawed. Dr. Serrano began smiling during appointments. The tiny flicker on the monitor became a steady rhythm, then a visible curve beneath my hand, then a future neither of us could pretend was only an obligation. One evening, Adrian found me in the unfinished nursery, standing beside the crib he had once tried to assemble alone. The room was warm now, painted soft ivory with pale blue curtains, shelves of books, and a rocking chair by the window overlooking the river. He stood in the doorway and asked, "May I come in?" I looked at him, this man who had once spoken in rules and now waited for permission to enter a nursery in his own home. "Yes," I said. He came to stand beside me, not too close, but close enough that the old bond between us settled softly instead of sharply. "I have been thinking about the wedding," he said. I almost laughed. "I try not to." I called it business because I was afraid to call it fate. His voice was quiet, stripped of performance. I thought if I named everything like a contract, nothing could hurt me. Then you looked at me as if you would rather lose everything than be owned, and I realized I had built an empire around an empty room. I turned toward him, my hand resting over our child. And now? Now I want a marriage you choose every morning, even on the mornings you are angry with me. I want a home with doors you can open. I want our child to grow up never wondering whether love is another word for debt. I felt the last hard piece of winter inside me loosen. Not disappear. Some pain does not vanish just because love arrives. But it moved aside enough for something living to grow around it. Months later, we held a second ceremony on the rooftop garden of Bellini Tower, with no investors, no forced smiles, and no contract waiting in another room. Dr. Serrano cried openly. Mrs. Vale pretended not to. Adrian wore gray instead of black, and when the officiant asked if I would choose him, I looked at the man who had learned to kneel. To ask, to wait, and finally to love without locking the door. I said yes, and this time, I meant it. Years from now, people would still whisper about the Blackwood Enigma and the Omega who changed the shape of his empire. They would talk